fast forward and if you know the gap between the
Yeah,
songs, so you
oh,
get
there's a
like,
stop.
this thing's amazing. Yep. Yeah, except for the couple of songs that have to stop in the middle of there, you know?
I would say then 3 years later, CDs came out.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Except, you know, when CDs first came out, you had the problem where like any bump on the
Oh,
road, they
yeah.
would skip.
It's get terrible.
Yeah.
Closest memory I have to that was getting the audiobooks from the library on tapes to put in the car.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was like the last bastion of that I remember.
I remember going to a
You can't say those mean things about Rocco anymore.
As slaves, as, yes.
You're gonna say that 3 times fast.
Yeah. Oh God, I really so rich. Okay. So yeah, for people that didn't know, Steve is joining from SPSS today. Well, I guess we should introduce ourselves too, so we already met.
Yep.
Pearl. Sarah.
And this is Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
She's one of our engagement specialists out here, coach. And again, thank you all for coming over that.
Yeah.
To us for saving the professor. So for our agenda, it's basically the same as what we sent in the email. We just thought we'd share our counters tonight, with each other. We have 2, and then you guys can share whichever ones you have ready for us. And then we wanted to take some time at the end to talk about the May 29th session as well. So I think, is there anything else you wanted to add to the agenda?
I think, I'm reading through Christina's notes and I'm
Okay.
reading through them carefully before I say on there, but I see the 29th. Yes, the articles that are on there, and then we have our stuff for economic stuff that I'm gonna go through here tonight as well. And I think I'm looking around, that's it as well. Okay.
That's it. Sweet.
Yep.
Okay, that sounds good. So we have counters for Article 1 and 7. I'm gonna pull up my notes real quick here. And I don't know if anyone off the top of their head feels, we edited this like a week ago, so I'm just gonna pull up the notes really quick. You guys want the quarter size paper copy? I'm gonna send it the digital right now. I just sent it over. It was so sad. So.
At first I was gonna say yes, but that's a lot of words.
It's
It's all like-
It's ugly, I'm gonna be on this. We'll just get-
All right.
Okay.
It's set to.
I think I need to do this.
Okay,
That
and
was
then
my-
I do this.
That should be better. I think we just updated that 200-day calendar employee section that we had been going back and forth about. We added in that ORS, definition of substitute teachers, so I think we just cleaned up the language there in section B. And then we have a statement about the temporary positions in that same section. And those are the main changes for that one. So not too many. And then for Article 7. Okay, so we edited some of the language around sick leave, did a couple grammar changes, added in paid leave Oregon as well. Keep going down, we changed the cash out from 2 days into 1 day. And I believe we kept in that statement about leave not being used to extended vacation, we left that language in. And then kept that update that was added from requesting leave through the electronic leave system. 24 hours in advance. And then there was a statement that we added in, or I think we kept that in actually from the previous count, and then you all gave us notifying within 60 days. So a lot of it, I think, was acceptance, and even when that's incorrect, but a lot of it was acceptance from the comment that we received. And then the strikeouts of the definitions around FTE, because I think we talked about that last time. So not a ton of edits on those, but those are the two that we wanted to share, so. Were you able to access those?
Yeah.
Perfect. And that's all we had for calendars, so whatever you guys have, we're ready to discuss.
Okay. So, I believe you're gonna get an email from Christina at about 7 o'clock. She said enough to go out ahead of time on there, just to make sure that we were through. Because she's pretty cool that way. We've got, we'll give you paper copies of it here, before the electronic goes through. Counter for Article 10. And bear with me. Make sure I've got everything on here. So on Article 10, we are accepting your language in D. H, right to information, we are fine with it on there, but we're adding in language in terms of cost associated with the pull on there that would fall back and still have language for you for that. And then we are accepting the language in I, which is the collective bargaining agreement training. And that should be all that's going on in Article 10. Okay, next we have Article 12. So walking through, first thing on there, we do need to strike the language in A regarding the investigations conducted solely by employer. We've talked that over with legal counsel. We have to be able to engage external parties in there for where there are conflicts of interest. There are spots that we just can't get around that. So we struck that. We are accepting your change on B2. For B3, so you had new language in there that we're going to strike. The big thing on this is it is being debated in the legislature right now, so we're going to follow whatever comes out law-wise on there and not get ahead of where the legislature is. So we struck B3, and then in E, yes, so in E, and I think we discussed this last time on there, the verbal reprimand of an employee only being in private, We struck that. We did again check in with legal counsel on it. There are many situations where we would really be in trouble if we adhered to this. So we talked about some before where if somebody was making an egregious comment, but this would even extend to if we had someone in EI who was doing something inappropriate or dangerous with a kid on there, we wouldn't want to say, we got to sit back and wait until we can discuss something in private. So we do have to be able to do the thing to directly intervene when it pops up. And I think that's all from 12.
Yeah.
That's all from 12.
Can I make a comment on E there?
You can, but boy, we might not be the right people at the table to talk about it.
Okay, I just want to add to the
Yeah.
conversation, maybe that can be discussed further. When we've looked at similar statements that are made, that are current, contract language, we have had similar questions about enforceability and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
I think there's maybe at least one other place where it comes up like this, where it's like, yeah, ideally, but there are circumstances in which it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. We'll take note of that.
Okay, and then finally, on 13, so I believe we are accepting 13 with one small change. H, and why do we not see H on here?
No, that's pervious.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay, with a little change in the order of the sentences. Oh, so I think we're rearranging where these are, just we think it flows better this way. As to where the complaint falls. So you can see we just kind of moved, I think what was in C up to B. Yeah.
Probably the things back, just the obviously
Yep.
like review and stuff like that, but,
Yep.
what do you all think about, maybe we could open the floor to talk about economics, because then we've been like thinking about that for a while, and then maybe we can caucus after that and review these, is that sound okay to all of you?
Works for us?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So I am gonna pop into Zoom here. Okay, so, so am I picking up from someone? Okay, we thought I did. Okay, so, I'm gonna walk through, we have several things to go through, so I've got a presentation that's gonna lay out. I'm gonna sort of lay out what we're going through, so in the presentation, then take a look at where we have our comparator salaries on there. Gonna walk through some of the stuff that you had before. We have a proposal on mileage stipend on there, and then we'll go through economics as well. Then I also want to take a moment to look at what we're looking at inside of the economics model that I showed you before, so you can see sort of where it's impacting, in what amounts on there, and then also take a look at your original proposal, in the same light on there, so that we're on the same page as to where everything is. I'll get fired up here. Feel free to stop me at any time if you've got questions. Okay. So let's go through, this is what we're gonna be looking at for economic consideration and proposal. I've got a copy of this that we'll give to you afterwards as well. So let's dive in. So first thing we want to do before we take a look at economics and getting into it is go through what we've been looking for in terms of comparator salaries. So what we're going to look at is the majority of the disciplines that we have at the ESD, and we've gone through and tried to draw on those to what we believe are reasonable comparators. So the sorts of places that we're looking at are the larger districts in our area. To make sure that we're, something of the similar size of us on there, the magnitude of people that we're serving. And we're also comparing to other ESDs within our general range. So we're looking at Wesdy, we're looking at Lane, we're looking at High Desert in the Intermountain. We're going to leave Northwest Regional and we're going to leave South Coast out on there. We don't think that they're good comparators. So we went through, pulled this the best that we could. You won't see every district and everything because we can't get responses from every district on every discipline. They don't always break them out. But this is sort of our best attempt to show you what we're looking at. So let's start in with school psychs. So what you're seeing up here, that's the ESD on top, and that's the range. All of these, what we're looking at. So this is the top column available at any district. So for us, school psychs only have one schedule. For Springfield, for instance, this might be Masters plus 50. We're always looking at their top column that they have available, and what you're looking at is the minimum of the salary up to the maximum of the salary. So when we look at the school psychs at the ESD, we are a sizable premium over any of the comparators that we're looking at on here. So that, again, that's Springfield, Lincoln County, Wesdy, Intermountain, Gaps, and Lane ESD. And we'll summarize these in a bit as well. So similarly, let's look at OTPT. So same exact concept, we're comparing top column to top column. In range on here, again, we're looking at a fairly sizable premium over even the next district down, but certainly districts as average that are on here. We're ahead of the pack, which is where we want to be. Licensed teachers, so this encompasses most everybody that isn't defined as a specialist on here. So this is going to be EIECSE teachers as well as long-term care and treatment teachers. We are in the number 2 slot on here. You'll see our low is a little bit lower than everybody else. High Desert has us beat on the top end by about $300. But again, we're in a really strong position here. SLPs. So SLPs, we are falling a little bit middle of the pack, and this is part of what we identified before. This is a position that we don't really want to be in because we hire a lot of specialists on here. It's a competitive marketplace, and we don't think competitively this is where we need to be for SLPs, and that kind of highlights part of the issue that we run into. However, if we were to convert the SLPs to the OTPT scale, that would again put them in the number 1 spot with a decent sized premium above even the number 2 position, but certainly above the districts as an average. When we look at OTA, PTA, we are sizably above the rest of the pack on both lows and highs. Our low on that is several $1,000s more than the high in Intermountain. And again, we think this is a good position to be in. And as we look at SLPAs as well, we're seeing a very similar trend on there. Our low end is competing with the high end in many districts on there, and our high end is going well beyond what anybody else is offering for the position. You'll see there are fewer comparators on here because they're actually really hard positions. A lot of people don't call them out distinctly. So when we look at this in general, to sort of contextualize what it is that we're looking at, this is discipline by discipline. The gray bar is representing the maximum amount that's available for all other districts, for the average of all the other districts that we had for comparators on there. That is the average amount that they pay at. The green bar represents the premium that LBL's pay is over there. So you can see the school psychs. We have a pretty sizable premium over the averages on there. Same thing with OTPT, a little bit less in licensed. SLP, even before converting on there, it's still above the average on there, but again, not where we want to be. And then you'll see sort of those sizable premiums on OTA, PTA, and SLPA. So that is our first thing context-wise about what we're looking for in salaries. You will see, based on this, we are on the high end of what's out there, typically being a number 1 or 2 slot. We like that position. We really want to maintain that position. We do have to be cautious about gaining ground above and beyond there, particularly when it comes to our component districts. We can't put ourselves into a position where what we're doing becomes unaffordable for them. So the premiums that we're at are okay. Increasing that premium above and beyond what districts would have if they paid that themselves on there is where we run into potential trouble. So we're going to be mindful of that as we go forward for proposals. I'm going to switch here and start talking about insurance caps. We had some discussion around what's available inside of insurance caps, and rather than just give you a counter on there, again, I want to make sure that we're contextualizing why it is we're proposing what we're proposing. For those of you who do not spend all day long thinking about how insurance works, I want to walk through some of the differentials that you have between what you would see at LBL and where you see other places. So there are 2 pricing models that are used in order to do insurance. And the first one is tiered insurance pricing. So this is where employee contributions vary based off the number of individuals being covered. So for instance, family coverage costs more than individual coverage under the same plan. That's a tiered pricing model. That is contrasted with a composite insurance pricing model where all employees are charged the same amount for a given plan, regardless of how many people they are actually covering under the plan. So that would be somebody covering a family is paying the same exact amount as somebody who is only covering an individual. That's a composite plan versus the tiered. At LBL, we run a tiered insurance plan, right? So it is more expensive to sign up for family coverage than it is to sign up for single coverage. The way that this works, looking towards affordability, individuals with single coverage stay within our insurance cap. So if you're signing up for individual coverage on there, you can take the most expensive plan at LBL and be inside of the insurance cap. People who are doing employee plus coverage pay more out of pocket, particularly if they're going towards the more comprehensive plans with lower deductibles. And not surprisingly, the most expensive model is employee plus family. That's kind of followed by employee plus partner, or employee plus children is next. All of those are premium on there. If you are on the very top plan doing employee plus family, it's a significant monthly cost that's out there. So one way that we mitigate for that cost is we use the insurance pool. So we maintain an insurance pool, and this is true across the ESD. This isn't just held inside of licensed. So we have an insurance pool that redistributes the savings from employees under the cap to support individuals over the cap. So if you are signing up on single coverage, and that number, if we're covering $1,350 a month, and if that number comes in at $750, we say, hey, there's $600 we didn't spend. We will aggregate all the money that was not spent inside the pool, and we'll say, let's take that aggregate amount and spread 50% of that over the cost of the individuals who are above the amount on there to help mitigate the cost of the more expensive plans. Good so far?
You said 50% of that?
50%, it's written in policy right now that it's 50% that goes to cover.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, so when we look at an opt-out payment, there are a couple of considerations that we have to look at. So the first is opt-out rate structures. So opt-out structures are typically only covered under composite rate structures. And part of that is because you need a fixed amount to be able to say this is equitable across all people that would be doing an opt-out, regardless of the coverage level that they're in. Under a tiered rate structure, the opt-outs would come at the expense of the insurance pool subsidization, which would drive up the cost on the family plans. So that would be a really big concern for us, is that family plans becoming even more expensive than they currently are. So for opt-out considerations at the ESD, if we were going to consider this, we would pretty much have to switch to a composite rate model. That is the standard that if you're gonna go to opt-out, but we couldn't just bring something like this in without addressing what would happen to the family coverage. We would be really concerned about what would happen to a group of individuals that are already going, some of them fairly substantially out of pocket. We do at the ESD, we have the ability to switch from a tiered rate structure to a composite rate structure. It is not something you do lightly. It is defined, OEDB tells you how and when you can do that. If you do it, you have to hold it for a minimum of 3 years. You can't try it out and say, we didn't like that and move backwards. If you do that, it takes a minimum of 1 year to implement. So essentially, if this is something that we really want to dig into, it's not something we could offer up with the current contract because we wouldn't have the ability to change quickly enough to do it. But if it's something that you want to look at in the future, we can study it as an agency. This consideration would affect everybody in the agency, not just licensed personnel. So we would need to make sure that we're running a process that includes the impacts that it would have on everyone in the agency. All right, next up, let's take a look at, you had a proposal of a cap increase to $1,700 per month per employee. So rationales and impacts on here. So yes, there are some pretty sizable differences when you look across districts as to what is offered for a cap. However, what you find is that those higher cap amounts are typically associated with districts that are running composite rates. Because everybody needs more money in order to get coverage under the plan. And when you raise the cap, it gives a benefit to every individual in the plan. If we were to go through right now and do this increase to $1,700 on here, 60% of your licensed staff would see no benefit at all to the cap being raised because 60% are already underneath the cap and will be moving forward. So we had talked about this dynamic previously. So last time, I'm sorry, morning isn't here. Last time we did economics, 2 rounds on there. We did the first one where we did 1 year and then we revisited again. We discussed this both times on there. Is the money better placed in the cap or is it better placed in the salaries on there? It's our recommendation to put the money into the salaries because that way it is realized by everybody. When you put it into the cap, you're concentrating the dollars on a smaller group of individuals. So our recommendation is going to be to stick with a moderate amount and the cap on there and leave the money over for salaries. Again, so that's going to take care of the comparisons and the insurance. So let's look at just a couple of other outstanding items before we get towards what we're doing on economics. So the next one is the conversion of the SLPs. So just to go through and run some numbers on this so you can see what we're seeing and how we're thinking about it. So the proposal, this is our original proposal to convert SLPs to the OTPT schedule. So there are 17 full-time SLPs currently on the books. Putting those individuals on the OTPT schedule is going to put $78,000 of increases in the pockets of those individuals. That's the equivalent of a 6% raise on average for those individuals. 7 out of those 17 people are going to see an increase of over $5,000 prior to step increases and COLAs. So once you put step and COLA on there, those are some pretty substantial amounts that will be going towards SLPs in general. When we make a conversion to the OTPT schedule, that will put the SLPs at a premium compared to other districts like we showed before, and would markedly increase our competitiveness in attracting and retaining SLPs. So as we have looked at our position and where we think we need to be in the market in order to compete on SLPs, we're very comfortable that putting on that schedule on there would give us the ability to fill the positions that we need to fill, at least dealing with the market dynamics that exist on the East Coast and specifically in the region in Oregon that we're in. We know it's always going to be a little bit tough. Why not the school psychologist schedule? So as we look at the school psychologist schedule, so converting the same group of individuals to the school psych schedule drives $218,000 of increases to those same 17 people. That's an average of a 16.7% raise. 13 of the individuals would be receiving between $12,000 and $18,000 increases, again, prior to any step or COLA adjustments. So when we look at that, we are not comfortable with putting that amount, that magnitude of our dollars down on the table for a small number of staff. We do want to make sure we're making a market adjustment, but we don't feel that it's appropriate to put that much in such a small group of people's pockets on there. And we are concerned about the impact financially this would have on some of the existing programs on there, specifically on EIECSE. Employs a lot of SLPs and put a lot of pressure on that grant, and I'll show you what that would end up looking like in a little bit here. Mileage stipends. We have both heard what it is that you're asking for. We understand that this has been an issue for licensed staff at the ESD for quite some time. Quite frankly, it is a very difficult thing for us to manage as well. We are sympathetic to what everybody goes through. It is difficult for us to make some of the management decisions we have to because of it. So we do really like putting something in here that's going to address it. So this is what we are proposing. And I'll give you some better articulated language on here, but just for the Cliff Notes version up here. So what we're looking at is that employees whose home base is located at one of LBL Components District's building receiving an annual stipend determined by the component district that they are associated with in that home base. This would not apply to a building owned by a component district but operated and occupied by LBL. So for instance, the EIECSE Lincoln County location on there, we're saying, well, we are occupying that as primary space. We're specifically trying to address hey, I interviewed at LBL, I understood this was the central location of LBL, and now I'm assigned out here. And very particularly, I've been working here for a while, and now you need me to work over here, and there is that economic burden. So what we're looking at is by district. So if you were inside of an LC building on there, there would be an annual stipend of $57.50. Sort of walk down. These are all built based around proximity to LBL in Albany. So we understand. So for instance, Corvallis or Gaps, we're saying there's no stipend associated with it. It should be roughly the same distance. You can take a look sort of across where it is. You see two things on there for Lincoln County. One is in the case that we had somebody who didn't live in Lincoln County that was assigned to Lincoln County. We don't have anybody currently in that situation, but we would want to address it in case we had to do that on there or somebody said, I'm willing to drive the pass every day. We're also looking specifically at Lincoln County residents on there. So if you're in Lincoln County, it is a hell of a distance to travel based off of where you might be. So on that one in general, we're just saying, look, we want to put that at about $17.50 because you could be doing some really significant travel based off of where you can be assigned inside of Lincoln County. So we'll pop that for you in proposal so you can take a look at what that looks like, but that is, how we'd like to try and get this addressed.
Can I ask a question, Rocco?
Yeah, sure.
Would this be meant as like a replacement for the current mileage system where we like, or this is just like a stipend based on where you are assigned?
This is stipend for where you're assigned, so we are addressing the issue of the commute. Once you go to your home location on there, once you travel, you are still reimbursable for all mileage that you have. This
Gotcha.
is just simply addressing I lived in Albany on there, you assigned me to Philomath every day, and that is further than I anticipated going, putting a stipend down to say we recognize that.
Gotcha, thank you.
Okay, other outstanding considerations. So we still have Article 6 sitting out there. And Article 6 is an issue for us. As we've gone through and did what costing we could on Article 6 so far, as we look at it, we cannot viably sustain operations if we're looking at the stuff that's been proposed in Article 6. So we're gonna come back with an Article 6 where we're essentially striking most of the stuff. We want to really sort of start out from there. We are still amenable to saying, are there issues inside of there that you want to address? Are there issues inside there you want to address that might cost money? And so we're gonna hold a little bit back to say like, okay, if that's important, we wanna make sure we have something in reserve for it on there. But our line is essentially that any proposal that would come into Article 6 that costs money has to still leave room for a 2.5% COLA for both 25-26 and 26-27. And I think we would both be in agreement that that would be a bare minimum that we would want to be able to deliver on the contract. And just to recognize that there are some expensive things that are sitting inside of Article 6 that will need to get addressed in order to move through the contract. So we'll pop one of those over to you as well. And that'll kind of bring us out to where we're going to start out for a base proposal. So the proposal that we're going to have is going to be to move the SLPs to the OTPT schedule. To add in the mileage stipend for the individuals whose home base is not an LBL building. We're going to start off at that 2.5% for the across the board increases for all licensed staff for both 25-26 and 26-27. And we are going to propose taking the cap to $1,400 a month in 25-26 and $1,450 in 26-27. We're basically hoping to sort of keep pace with inflation on there, but recognizing that not everybody benefits from that cap on there. And we'd like to see more money going towards salaries so that it's spread around more evenly. The other note that I want to make on there, we really do want to put more money on the table than the 2.5. We are holding back on that until we know what we want done with Article 6 to make sure we have something to address. That will bring us through what I have for a presentation. And again, I'll give you a copy of the presentation on there. I do want to walk through that model as well. So we're on the same page and being transparent as to what the two proposals would look like and why we're suggesting what we do. Any questions, thoughts, discussion on what we just went through?
I have a question about the salary comparators that you showed at the beginning.
Yeah.
That was literally just off the salary schedules.
Yes.
Okay.
So the only thing that is not off the salary schedules on there, Intermountain doesn't do the PERS pickup. So the 6% that goes into the IAP, districts have the choice as to whether they pay that on the behalf of employees or don't. Intermountain's the only district in there that does not. So we knock 6% off their salary so that we're seeing apples to apples. The other thing that we do is that when it is listed out on the schedule that says certain groups get a stipend, and I want to say Wesley's popping in my mind on there. Wesley says for things like school sites and OTPT and SLP, they add a standard stipend on. We've thrown that stipend in as part of it on there. So we're seeing as close to apples to apples as we can get.
If it's listed on the schedule.
If it's listed on the schedule, we've gone through and we've done best diligence we can to see if there's something on there. For the most part, it has to be listed on the schedule. The license agreements say that any compensation has to be done through the bargaining agreement, so it should be on the schedule for everyone. Okay. So I'm gonna stop sharing this. Switch over. Yeah.
Larissa was asking if would audiologists or our audiologist and nurse be moved to the OTPT schedule as well?
I don't currently have them built in there. It's not currently what we have in the proposal. We don't currently have a nurse on staff.
Oh,
I recognize you put that out there before, and I apologize. I didn't think about that when I was doing this. So officially, no, it's not.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at what our initial economics proposal is going to look like. And I'm gonna walk through, Jules has seen this a couple of times now. I'm sure he's really enamored to see it one more time on a Friday night. So again, what this is we're gonna go through and we're gonna look at the 9 buckets that we have to pay everybody out of separately, recognizing that the funds are non-fungible. We can't use dollars from one program to pay for people for another program. The first version that we showed was, hey, operations continuing as normal. This version is already included the cuts that we have already made. So we announced earlier this year, we cut some administrative positions, those have been taken out. We announced earlier that we did a buyout plan to remove some classified positions, those are already taken out. We already knew ahead of time that we had a couple of retirements going through, those are already taken out. What that's going to say is that if you go out to our website and you pull the proposed budget that's out there right now, the numbers that you see are going to be right on top of the proposed budget, which is all the information we've had current up to that point in time. So this should be the closest thing we have to when we're looking at a number on here. It really does signal we have to do something in licensed land, or we have to come up with something else at the ESD in order to address it. So all of those have been updated in here. And I've also gone through and updated the funding amounts to our most current number that we have. So some of these are more current than what is even on the budget. For instance, our budget says we got 13,155,000 was the assumption for EIECSE. We recently got numbers in from the state that said, nope, that number is going to be 12,975. So I have updated to what the most recent number we have available is. And yes, they are going to change again. So this is still most recent, but we're getting closer and closer. So with the assumptions up here of 2.5 across the board, all groups, with the step advancements, the SLP conversion to the OTPT scale, and the $1,400 a month insurance cap, this is where it puts us program by program. So you'll see we still have room in tier 1. Tier 2 is over. And tier 2 is going to be over almost regardless of what we do. What that means is one of two things. Either the districts are going to have to say, yeah, we'll agree to pay more money on there, or the districts are going to say, it's too much for us to come out of pocket, we're going to cut services. And we don't really know where they're going to end up in general. But that 280, if I had to guess, a good portion of that 280 comes out of purchase of SLPs, which is a little bit easier to digest on there because most of that is contract house. Some of it as well can be a deselection of other services on there. So they might say, for instance, hey, I'm buying a $10,000 computer module from you on there. I'll stop buying that instead. But the majority of what they're buying is licensed labor. The Cascade Regional Grant would still have a little bit of room in it with the 2.5 that's baked in. The long-term care and treatment grant is under. So our initial read from the state, we budgeted a higher number than this. The first number they gave us back is pretty low. They are concerned about funding moving forward for that program. So there's an asterisk on long-term care and treatment that this is another one of the programs now we're gonna have to be careful as to how things affect it. The SPSS grants, we've known sort of since the beginning on here that the funding for them has really dried up. Flat funding is going to be a dream. If we get flat funding, it's likely going to take a cut. We know already that there are more positions that need to go away inside of the SPSS grants. A lot of that, we have plans for how that comes out with people who are retiring or people who are on temporary contracts that know that it's going to expire, but it's still a pretty big hit to the grant. And then the TNF grant, we just got news that the TNF grant is going to get cut in half. So it's gonna be very difficult to do anything with that grant right now. So the 2.5 would leave us in this position right here. And we would say program by program, yeah, we could do this. There would be some places where it might pinch. It would obviously be things like in long-term care and treatment. It would signal there's a position open that we can't fill, right? It's a lot to come up with 250,000 on a $2.5 million program. But we would look and say as an agency on there, we think we can reasonably sustain this with what's in the 2.5. Questions on any of that? Okay, I'm gonna go through and rebuild the initial proposal that you had put in, just so you can see what we're seeing when we look at it. So that was 8, 8, 5, 8. SLP is going to school psych schedule, and that going to 1,700. So all the same labor, right? Updated figures on there. And this is where it's putting us at. That's that $2.5 million aggregate figure. With very large losses in certain places. So I do want to take just a moment to characterize the sorts of changes that this might trigger. So in tier 1, that $400,000, probably the first place that we go. We have a couple of open positions that are out there that we would not end up filling, licensed positions. That means it is a workload issue. Current contract labor that is helping to relieve workload of people who are on full-time staff, that would be one of the first places that we would have to go. So that would be a really tough one to sustain. We could do it without cutting positions, but we don't think that it would be well received by anyone. In tier 2 at $600,000, unquestionably services will be cut by districts. The difficult thing about that is the districts have to select that based off of their need. So we don't know which positions would be likely to go. I couldn't tell you that it's going to be those SLP positions out there because the districts say, look, I need SLP more than I need behavior consultant. They will let go of behavior consultant. But that is easily looking at that is probably 3 current individuals losing their jobs. EIECSE, this is catastrophic for the grant. $650,000 is clearly not filling any open positions we have. It is having to cut into licensed staff and probably having to cut into IA support. It would fundamentally change the way that you have to operate the grant. That would be a really, really tough one to sustain. The Cascade Regional Grant, you're looking at a position there. I can't remember whether Angie has an open position out there now or we've recently filled it. I can't remember, but that 150 is about the equivalent of a full-time position. Long-term care and treatment, again, this is a huge number for long-term care and treatment. Again, kind of a fundamental shift in the way that things would have to be done in the program in order to sustain that kind of loss in the program on there, to mitigate that kind of loss, I should say. SPSS, that is above and beyond what we already have. We know we have that kind of 190 coming out. That is probably another position coming out of SPSS. And the TNF grant is a tough one anyway, but just so as we look at the proposal and we recognize everybody wanting to be paid the best that we can do, we look at this proposal and say we couldn't sustain this at the ESD. Which is why our initial walk back is gonna be looking at that 2.5 as a base that we can start from. Questions, thoughts? I know it's a lot of numbers. We're really trying to be as transparent as we can. So we do have printouts of both of these pages. So you can see, you'll be able to take these back with you and see how it lines up, with each one of those. So remembering EI at 650 and tier 1 at 435. That's the kind of differential that you're looking at. That's sort of where that 200 comes from, is mostly in those two spots there. A little bit in tier 2 as well. Okay, so handing over to you now, bear with me. Piece by piece, so this will be Article 6, which there's some language in there that's sticking in there. Most of it is struck from us. The mileage stipend, we're moving into Article 16 because it's a compensation matter on there, not a working condition matter, so you see it struck out of there, but it'll move into Article 16. Along those lines, this is the language that we would put into Article 16 regarding the mileage stipend. These are copies of the presentation. So you have those, missing the page that has the mileage stipend on there, but you have the other version of that. These are the management 2.5 impacts on the front page, and those are your prior proposal 8 and 5. So you have a copy of those as well. Finally, this would be 3 over here. These would be the salary schedules that would go along with those 2.5s with the SLP conversion for 25, 26, and 26, 27. God, I hope that's everything.
I've really been enjoying Rocco having to deal with all this.
Really stressful. I don't mind the numbers, but the paper is really stressful.
Digital copies have also gone through.
Oh, perfect. Something that you could recall you were talking about, for the mileage stipend.
Yep.
Do you have an estimate of like how much that would cost?
I do somewhere, Joe, but it's so stale in my mind now, I can't think what it is.
I think that would be something like maybe at the next session, if it's possible, like,
Yeah.
if that's a calculation you can get, that'd be interesting to see just like how much that,
Yeah.
that costs the agency.
Yep, I've got it somewhere, it's just stale in my mind.
That's okay. And then it is not on, well, it is kind of related to economics. Morning is chiming in about, she just was gonna ask a follow-up about the ECSE days. Just, I know we kind of briefly mentioned that conversation about the required number of days. And she was wondering if, how that would kind of relate to the impact around reducing student contact days to add those paperwork days.
So there has been a discussion about it. I'm gonna defer until Christina and Nancy are back, because it's really just not my area and I don't want to state anything for you.
Okay.
Unless Tim, we think about it.
No. What I remember, and of course I can't remember the term for it, but it said that the law says that the days are determined by what's in the IEP. Our, there's another name for it for the EI kids and it just gets.
IFSP.
Yes, there you go. So it's at the days are determined in there, so what we have to do is look at how many staff we have, how many hours we have to offer the kids, and then see how many days we need to fit that in there, which is really hard to determine ahead of time until you know who the kids are, who the services they're gonna have. So that's why we've kind of standardized it at the way it is now, because we know we can fit all the kids' services.
Yeah, that's an interesting. It's like, I mean, the minutes, obviously their structure is different in school, right? But, like those minutes, there you do have some leeway with minutes on the IFSP and AP documentation, but how that applies to like school day, that's.
Right.
You do, there is actually a secondary consideration on it as well, and I hate to always bring everything back to dollars, but dollars are real. One of the things we have to watch is that the program itself is funded by how many children we have inside of the program. And the less we provide, if families look to find a different solution to serve their children outside of the program, that eventually drives the funding of the program down. So you do have to be careful about changing service levels if it's impacting families to a level where they say, I don't think I'm getting what I need to off of the program.
And Morning did follow up, and we said that in IFSPs that those minutes are referenced to the calendars. You did clarify that. Do we think maybe some copies of that would be good? And then. What do you think, 45 minutes?
Yeah, I think so. I think we talked before about 8 being a stopping time. Is that right? I think we have 8:30 on the schedule, but I thought I remembered people want.
I think 8 like normal.
Okay, we could, yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay. Yeah, we all invite time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Sweet. And I showed everybody else for the room, this, you all are upstairs.
We're not telling Rob.
It will want me up there anyway.
We're gonna point him over that building.
Point me to the local bar.
I saw one. Yeah, so we'll shoot for 7:30. You know. If the girls missing that, we could maybe talk about the. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's more us centric. So we. Because of like myself and like different members on the team having direct services that day, I think the 29th is gonna be a struggle for us to get that coverage for without like losing minutes for kids. And so we had been talking about some alternatives, and we didn't really land on one, but we wanted to toss some out that we had that were potentially adding evenings, like maybe one on the 22nd. Next week, I know that's really soon. We had also discussed the possibility of doing an all day later in June, once like services are done. So I think the ones we had talked about were like sometime in that last week of work or the week after. So we just wanted to like kind of offer that out just because it's like crunch time at the end of the year first. And we know that like not everyone's here for you all, so. But
And I know we had talked too about offering them if we did want to do the 29th, just starting later in the day and maybe doing from like 1 PM to 8 PM or something. Still not working.
Yeah.
It's still
there's some
happening.
districts is the problem with that one.
Those darn kids.
I know, I mean, if we started at 1, I'd have to leave like 11:45, I mean,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, it's just, then, yeah.
Clients.
I know, I'll just bring them with me, we'll do some like.
So not to throw a cog in the, or whatever the expression
Yeah,
is, you know.
we'll see what we can do and get back to you on that.
Yeah, I don't think, I think both of those ideas are viable. I think we're in the same position. We would love to get as much done as possible. Got to finish up before everybody goes away.
Yeah,
I'm sure we can figure out an evening to put on and a full day later in the year. Yeah, we'll be available. If we get a day that works for all of you on there, we can do the full day later in the year. So, yeah, we can
So you're saying
collaborate.
the 22nd, like next week would work for all of you?
that was just a potential idea. I think we need to double check if that works. We're still good for the evening on the 29th, like just like our
Yeah.
normal
Yeah.
evening.
Yep.
But the 22nd, we'll have to check. Yeah. And I think what we had still after the 29th was,
The week of the 9th,
Yeah.
the week of June 9th, or the week of June 16th.
and we have, at least right now, we have June 5th and the 12th
And the 12th.
on the calendar for just normal evening sessions, so. So I don't know, maybe we'll do like a Calendly or
Yeah.
something like that to figure out when the most people are free and share that with people.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Is anyone, I stepped up for a little bit, is anyone comfortable talking about our review of the 10, 12, and 13?
Yeah, I think so. We know we're not making any TAs tonight.
Sure.
But, we think we're really close with a couple of these. And could probably, take care of them at the next session, with some very minor changes. For 10, we would accept your changes, to process the grievance, and we're just removing a couple words for clarity, things that we have in there already. So that we should. I think we need a little bit more time and discussion around, Article 12 and discipline of employees. I guess just kind of to sort of test the waters on this, as we were talking through, we're explaining like the piece about third-party investigations and that kind of thing. Sometimes being needed to avoid like conflicts of interest. There may be some circumstances where it makes sense, over an internal investigation. I think our position, as an EA is that, the best practice would be to err on the side of an internal investigation, but I think we also recognize that there are those circumstances. And I think what we would be aiming for is seeing if there's some way to have language that acknowledges that it is an option. But that our priority should be, looking at solving things internally first. So that one, I don't think we're quite there yet, but that gives a sense of where we might be leaning there as we draft. And then I think we would also be ready to TA, 13 complaint procedure, with the, movement of the language. I think that's something that we, had sought as well, and we're looking at the same thing, and it doesn't matter too much, where the language ends up, so long as it's still in there.
And as far as six, I think we still need to look at all that with everybody here together and, yeah, just figure out where we want to arrange stuff and things like that, but yeah, we'll take that to some of our own caucusing and drafting planning. Did you all have anything on Article 1 or 7?
Just that we're gonna run them past Christina and Nancy.
There it is. Okay. I guess for sure we'll be back on the 29th. And I mean, we have like 20 minutes. I mean, is there anything else that we wanted to like talk about while we're here together? Personally, have anything bubbling up? Anything else that you all want to? Okay. Thank you all again for coming out here.
Yeah.
That means a lot. Yeah.
Was happy to see somebody.
I know, I should really have you there too.
Yeah.
Yes. And we had I don't know if anyone on to this from the coast, but we used.
There were a couple names I didn't recognize, so I'm hoping that they will come together.
Yeah. Sweet. We're good then.
So you all making a big drive back?
I am.
So. And I took a picture of